Billy Bob Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished securing the last strap on his cargo. The summer heat in Kentucky made the truck stop parking lot shimmer. 20 years of hauling freight across America's highways had left him with a bad back and a worse outlook on life. He climbed into his truck cab and checked his phone. No messages. It had been that way since Marlene left him last year. Their daughter was in college now, and the house felt too big and too quiet. The open road was his only comfort these days. Billy Bob was about to start his engine when a black car pulled up beside his truck. The window rolled down to reveal a woman in a neat business suit. She didn't look like she belonged at a truck stop. "Mr. Johnson, do you have a minute?" Her voice was smooth and professional. Billy Bob frowned. "Ma'am, if you're selling something, I ain't buying. I'm offering something, but not selling." She smiled. "My name is Eliza Monroe. I represent Galactic Transport Incorporated." "Never heard of it," Billy Bob said. "Few have. We're very selective about who we approach." She handed him a business card. It shimmered oddly in the sunlight, the logo changing colors as he turned it. "We'd like to offer you a job." Billy Bob laughed. "I already got a job. One that pays 10 times what you're making now." That stopped his laughter. "What's the catch?" "It's long-distance hauling. Very long distance." Eliza looked up at the sky. "Let's just say your routes would take you much farther than interstate highways." Billy Bob thought she was crazy, but something in her eyes made him pause. "Why me?" "Your driving record, your reflexes, your ability to make split-second decisions. You're exactly the kind of pilot we need." "Pilot? I drive trucks, lady." "The principles are similar," Eliza said. "Mr. Johnson, humanity has qualities that are unique. Other species find our unpredictability useful in certain situations." Billy Bob stared at her. "Other species? You talking about aliens?" Eliza simply smiled. "If you're interested, meet me tomorrow at this address." She handed him a piece of paper. "Or don't. Continue your life as it is. The choice is yours." Billy Bob watched her drive away, the paper clutched in his hand. He should throw it away. This woman was clearly insane. But he didn't. The next day, Billy Bob found himself driving to an ordinary-looking office building on the outskirts of town. He told himself he was just curious. Nothing would come of it. Inside, Eliza was waiting. "I'm glad you came," she said, leading him to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. "Please, sit." A screen on the wall flickered to life, showing images that made Billy Bob's mouth drop open. Spaceships, stars, creatures that couldn't possibly be from Earth. Galactic Transport Incorporated moves cargo throughout known space, Eliza explained. Most species have evolved to be careful, methodical, risk-averse. But some shipping routes require a different approach. And you want humans for this. We want you, Mr. Johnson. Your reflexes and instincts are exactly what we need for routes through the Cygnus corridor." Billy Bob watched footage of what looked like a massive truck cab attached to an even more massive spaceship. "The pay is real. The danger is real," Eliza continued. "You would be among the first humans to officially join the galactic community." "What about my life here?" Billy Bob asked. "What life?" Eliza's words hit hard. "Your marriage is over. Your daughter is grown. You live in your truck. We're offering you the stars." Billy Bob thought about the endless highways, the same truck stops, the empty house. Then he looked at the screen again, at the vastness of space. "When do I start?" he asked. Eliza smiled. "Right now." Billy Bob stepped out of the black van into bright Nevada sunlight. A large warehouse stood before him, plain and ordinary from the outside. Armed guards stood at the entrance, checking IDs with devices that looked nothing like anything Billy Bob had seen before. "Welcome to your new life," Eliza said, walking beside him. "For the next month, this will be your home." Inside, the warehouse opened up into a massive space filled with strange machines and simulator pods. Billy Bob saw 3 other people standing in a group, looking as confused as he felt. "Your fellow recruits," Eliza explained, "all chosen for the same qualities we saw in you." A man with broad shoulders and a military haircut approached them. "I'm Frank Dawson, your lead instructor. You can call me Frank." He looked at each of them with sharp eyes. "By the end of this month, you'll either be ready to pilot a space freighter or you'll wash out. No second chances." Billy Bob sized up the other recruits, a woman with short blonde hair and a confident stance, a young man with dark hair who couldn't stop fidgeting, an older man with arms crossed and a skeptical look. "Susan Wright," the woman said, extending her hand to Billy Bob, "used to fly stunt planes." "Joe Martinez," the young man added. "NASCR, until I crashed too many times." "Hank Peterson," the older man nodded. "Air Force, retired." "Billy Bob Johnson," he said, feeling out of place. "Just a trucker." Frank led them to a simulator that looked like a spaceship cockpit attached to a truck cab. "This is similar to what you'll be flying. The Galactic Standard Mark VI heavy transport. We call it a space truck, but it's more complex than anything on Earth." For the next 8 hours, Frank showed them how the controls worked, how to read the alien symbols, how to understand the navigation system. Billy Bob's head was spinning by lunch. They ate in a small cafeteria where the food was familiar but the talk was not. Frank explained more about the job they were training for. "Most species in the galaxy are cautious by nature, logical. They don't take unnecessary risks," Frank said between bites of his sandwich. "Humans are different. We're unpredictable. We make intuitive leaps. We take chances." "And that's good?" Joe asked. "For certain shipping routes, yes. The Cygnus corridor is full of dangers that don't follow logical patterns. Pirates who use unexpected tactics, asteroid fields with random movements, spatial anomalies that defy standard navigation." Susan leaned forward. "So we're crazy, and that makes us good truckers." Frank smiled. "That's one way to put it." After lunch, they spent hours in the simulators. Billy Bob crashed 4 times before he started to get the hang of it. By dinner, his eyes were crossed and his brain felt fried. That night in his small room, Billy Bob stared at the ceiling. What had he gotten himself into? He was just a country boy who drove trucks. Now he was supposed to be a space pilot. It seemed impossible. But as days passed, Billy Bob found himself improving faster than the others. His years on the road gave him an edge when it came to handling the big rig's momentum. The simulator began to feel familiar. After 2 weeks, Frank pulled Billy Bob aside. "You're doing better than expected," he said. "Thanks, I think," Billy Bob replied. "There's something you should know." Frank's face grew serious. "You're not just being trained as a pilot. You're an ambassador. How you behave will affect how aliens view all humans." Billy Bob swallowed hard. "No pressure, right?" Frank didn't smile. "Just remember that when you're out there, you're not just Billy Bob anymore. You're humanity's face to the stars." That night, Billy Bob couldn't sleep. His mind kept racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Space, aliens, a whole galaxy he never knew existed. And somehow, a simple trucker from Kentucky was going to be one of the first to see it all. Billy Bob stood frozen as the transport ship's door opened. After a month of training and another week of space travel in a windowless room, he was finally seeing his new workplace. Nexus 7 space station stretched before him, a massive wheel spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. "Move it, Johnson," Hank said from behind. "You're blocking the exit." Billy Bob stepped onto the station's deck. The gravity felt almost like Earth, but something was slightly off. The air smelled clean but strange, with hints of smells he couldn't name. And then there were the aliens. A tall, thin being with blue skin and 4 arms guided them through the arrival area. Signs in multiple languages flashed on walls. Creatures of all shapes moved through the halls, some with too many limbs, others floating rather than walking. "Stay close," Frank warned the group. "It's easy to get lost here." Billy Bob tried not to stare, but it was hard. A group of short, furry aliens chattered as they passed. Something that looked like a walking plant carried packages in vine-like arms. "Welcome to Galactic Transport Headquarters," said a smooth voice. A human man approached them. He wore a uniform with the company's logo and had the easy confidence of someone used to this strange place. "I'm John Russell, Earth Liaison Officer. I'll be helping you settle in." They followed John to a large room filled with screens showing star maps and shipping routes. The walls were transparent, giving a view of docked spaceships. They looked like giant versions of semi-trucks connected to massive cargo containers. "Each of you will be assigned to a training crew before you get your own ship," John explained. "You'll also each be paired with a navigator from another species." Susan raised her hand. "Why can't we navigate ourselves?" "Different species, different strengths," John said. "Humans are great pilots because we react quickly and think outside the box. But for complex space math and multidimensional navigation, other species have advantages." A door opened and 4 aliens entered. They had squid-like bodies with multiple tentacles, but moved on land with surprising grace. Their skin shifted colors as they approached. "These are culinary navigators," John said. "The best in the business." One of the aliens approached Billy Bob. Its skin turned a friendly shade of green. "I am Zolktar," it said, its voice coming from a small device around what might be its neck. "I will be your navigation partner." Billy Bob tried to hide his shock. "Nice to meet you," he managed to say. "You are afraid," Zolktar said, turning slightly orange. "This is normal. I was also afraid when I first met humans." Billy Bob felt embarrassed. "Sorry, I've just never seen anyone like you before." "And I had never seen anyone like you," Zolktar replied, its color warming to yellow. "But I have studied your species. You are interesting, unpredictable. This makes you good pilots for dangerous routes." After the introductions, John led them to their quarters. Billy Bob's room was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and bathroom. A large window showed the endless expanse of space. "Get some rest," John advised. "Tomorrow you start training with your navigators. In 1 week, you'll make your first delivery runs." Left alone, Billy Bob sat on his bed and stared out the window. Just 3 months ago, he had been driving his truck across Kentucky. Now he was on a space station, partnered with an alien squid, about to become a galactic delivery man. His data pad beeped with a message. It was from Zolktar. "Human music is fascinating. Would you share more examples during our training tomorrow?" Billy Bob smiled. During their introduction, he had mentioned his love for country music. Maybe this wouldn't be so strange after all. He typed back, "Ever heard of Johnny Cash?" As he lay in bed that night, Billy Bob wondered what other surprises awaited him in this vast galaxy. Tomorrow would be his first real step into his new life as a space trucker, and despite everything, he couldn't wait to get started. Billy Bob stared at the ship assigned to him and Zolktar. Unlike the sleek vessels he had seen in the docking bay, this one looked old and worn. The paint was scratched in places, and some parts seemed mismatched. "This is the Rusty Nail," John said, patting the hull. "She's not pretty, but she's reliable." "You named a spaceship Rusty Nail?" Billy Bob asked. "Actually, you did," John replied with a smile. "Company policy. Human pilots name their own ships." Billy Bob walked around the vessel. It reminded him of his first truck, not the newest model, but solid where it counted. Rusty Nail it is, then. Inside, the cockpit was similar to the simulator he trained in, but with more wear and tear. 2 seats faced the main controls, one clearly designed for humans, the other shaped to accommodate Zolktar's tentacles. Zolktar was already there, its skin a focused blue as it checked navigation systems. "Our first cargo is loaded. it said when it noticed Billy Bob. Medical supplies for Outpost 87. Billy Bob settled into his seat, feeling the familiar contours support his back. What's our route? Zolk'tar's skin rippled with yellow dots. We must pass through the edge of the sickness corridor. Not the most dangerous section, but still challenging. A good first run. John handed Billy Bob a tablet. Your delivery contract and route clearance. You'll need to present these at checkpoints. Billy Bob scanned the document, surprised to find he could read it despite the alien text. Translation implant, John explained, tapping his own temple. Part of your training package. After a final systems check, Billy Bob and Zolk'tar prepared for departure. Billy Bob felt sweat on his palms as he gripped the controls. This was nothing like hauling freight on highways. This was space. Endless, merciless space. Nexus 7 Control. This is Transport A113. Call sign Rusty Nail. Requesting departure clearance, he said, remembering his training. A crisp voice responded through the comm system. Transport A113. You are cleared for departure. Lane 3 is open. Billy Bob eased the ship forward, feeling its weight respond to his commands. Despite its size, it moved smoothly out of the docking bay and into open space. Course laid in, Zolk'tar said, its tentacles dancing over the navigation controls. Engage main drive when ready. Billy Bob took a deep breath and pushed the thrust lever forward. The engines roared to life, pushing them away from the station and into the black. 6 hours later, they approached their first refueling stop, a small station orbiting a dead moon. Billy Bob had spent the time getting to know his ship and swapping stories with Zolk'tar. The alien was fascinated by Earth culture and had a surprising appreciation for Johnny Cash. Approaching Station K-12, Zolk'tar announced, standard refueling protocols apply. As Billy Bob maneuvered toward the docking clamps, alarms suddenly blared through the cockpit. Red lights flashed on the control panel. What's happening? He asked, fighting to keep the ship steady. Zolk'tar's skin pulsed with alarmed orange patterns. 3 ships approaching from Sector 7. Not responding to identification requests. Pirates? Billy Bob asked, remembering his briefing on space dangers. Likely, Zolk'tar confirmed. Corporate rivals or independent operators. They target medical shipments for black market sale. Billy Bob assessed their options. The station was still 10 minutes away. The approaching ships would intercept them before they could dock. Can we outrun them? Zolk'tar's skin darkened. The Rusty Nail is a transport vessel, not a speed ship. Billy Bob grinned, feeling a familiar rush of adrenaline. Maybe not on the straightaway. But I bet those fancy pirates don't know how to handle a heavy rig in tight spaces. He spun the ship around and headed straight for a dense field of space debris that floated between them and the station. What are you doing? Zolk'tar's voice rose in pitch. Taking the shortcut, Billy Bob replied, guiding the ship into the field. Time to show them what a Kentucky truck driver can do. As the debris closed around them and the pirate ships followed, Billy Bob felt strangely at home. Different terrain, same principle, and he'd always been good at threading the needle on dangerous roads. The Rusty Nail shuddered as Billy Bob guided it through the debris field. Chunks of metal and rock floated all around them, some as small as a fist, others as large as a house. This is extremely dangerous, Zolk'tar said, its skin flashing worried patterns of orange and red. These objects do not follow predictable paths. That's what I'm counting on, Billy Bob replied, his eyes fixed on the field ahead. Those pirates have faster ships, but I bet they don't have much experience with this kind of flying. On the scanner, the 3 pirate ships followed them into the debris field. Their sleek designs allowed them to move quickly, but Billy Bob noticed they were being cautious, keeping their distance from the larger objects. They're staying in formation, Billy Bob noted. That's their mistake. He spotted a gap between 2 large spinning pieces of debris and aimed for it. The Rusty Nail barely fit through the opening. Behind them, one of the pirate ships tried to follow, but had to veer away at the last second, when the gap suddenly narrowed. "How did you know that would happen?" Zolk'tar asked, its color shifting to an impressed purple. Billy Bob smiled. "I didn't, but when you've driven through enough mountain passes in bad weather, you learn to read the signs. Space junk or snow drifts. It's all about watching how things move." He twisted the controls again, taking them deeper into the field where the debris was thicker. The pirate ships still followed, but they were falling behind, forced to take longer routes around the dangerous obstacles. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Large mass approaching from Sector 4, Zolk'tar reported. "Very large." Billy Bob looked out the viewport and saw it. A massive chunk of what might once have been a space station, slowly rotating and pulling smaller debris toward it with its gravity. "Perfect," Billy Bob said. "Perfect. It's blocking our path to the station." Zolk'tar's skin rippled with confusion. "Not blocking. It's giving us an opportunity." Billy Bob adjusted their course directly toward the massive object. "Ever hear of a gravity slingshot?" Before Zolk'tar could answer, Billy Bob fired the thrusters at maximum power. The rusty nail shot forward toward the rotating mass. At the last possible moment, he curved their trajectory to swing around it. The ship groaned under the strain as the gravity of the large debris caught them and whipped them around. Billy Bob felt the G-forces push him back into his seat, despite the ship's compensators. "Hold on," he shouted as they completed the arc around the mass and shot out the other side at nearly twice their previous speed. Behind them, the pirate ships hesitated. Two turned away, unwilling to risk the maneuver. The third, probably piloted by someone with more courage than sense, attempted to follow. It didn't make it. The pirate ship came in too fast, and at the wrong angle. It scraped against the edge of the rotating mass, sending it spinning out of control into a cluster of smaller debris. "They'll survive," Billy Bob said, noticing Zolk'tar's concerned look. "Those ships have good emergency systems, but they won't be following us anymore." 10 minutes later, they docked safely at Station K-12. Security officers were waiting for them, alerted by the station's monitors about the pirate activity. As the refueling began, a station official approached them. She was humanoid, but with pale green skin and silver eyes. "That was quite a display of piloting," she said to Billy Bob. "We don't often see that kind of flying from a cargo hauler." Billy Bob shrugged. "Just doing my job, Mom." After the official left, Zolk'tar's skin glowed a warm yellow. "You did not mention this kind of flying in your training." "Some things you can't learn in a simulator," Billy Bob replied, patting the ship's console fondly. "Sometimes you just have to feel the road, or in this case, the space between the roads." Zolk'tar made a sound that Billy Bob realized was laughter. "I believe I made the right choice in accepting a human partner. This journey will be more interesting than I anticipated." As they prepared to depart for the second leg of their journey, Billy Bob felt a strange sense of belonging. Out here among the stars, with danger and adventure waiting, he had found his place. He was no longer just a washed-up truck driver. He was Billy Bob Johnson, space trucker. After refueling at Station K-12, Billy Bob and Zolk'tar continued their journey toward Outpost 87. The next part of their route would take them through the edge of the Cygnus Corridor, the most dangerous part of their trip. "We are entering Vrex territory," Zolk'tar said, its skin turning a cautious gray. "We must stay on the approved shipping lane." Billy Bob nodded. He had been briefed about the Vrex, a warlike species that controlled several star systems in this sector. They allowed commercial ships to pass through their territory, but only on strictly defined routes. "How long until we're through their space?" Billy Bob asked. 4 hours if we maintain current speed," Zolk'tar replied. "The medical supplies we carry have diplomatic clearance, so we should not be stopped for inspection." The first 2 hours passed quietly. Billy Bob found himself enjoying the view. The stars were different here than they appeared from Earth, and occasional bursts of cosmic dust created beautiful patterns against the black of space. "You know," Billy Bob said, breaking the comfortable silence, "back on Earth, I'd listen to old country songs during long hauls. Makes the time pass easier." Zolk'tar's skin rippled with interest. "We can play music here. The ship's system is compatible with your data devices." Billy Bob grinned and connected his phone to the console. Soon, the sounds of Willie Nelson filled the cockpit. To his surprise, Zolk'tar seemed to enjoy it, its tentacles moving slightly in rhythm with the music. The peaceful moment was broken by a harsh alarm. Red lights flashed across the control panel. "Incoming transmission," Zolk'tar announced, silencing the music. "Vrex patrol vessel demanding we stop for inspection." Billy Bob frowned. "I thought you said our cargo had diplomatic clearance." "It does." Zolk'tar's skin darkened with concern. "This is unusual." A large ship appeared on their scanner, moving to intercept them. It was shaped like a predatory bird, with weapon ports clearly visible along its hull. "Attention transport vessel," a harsh voice crackled through the comm system. "You have deviated from the approved lane by 0.3 spatial units. Stop immediately for boarding and inspection." Billy Bob checked their position. "We didn't deviate. We're exactly on course." Zolk'tar's skin flashed with alarm patterns. "I believe they are lying. The Vrex have been known to create false violations as an excuse to seize valuable cargo." "What happens if they board us?" Billy Bob asked. "Best case, they delay us for days. Worst case, they confiscate our medical supplies and possibly the ship. The Vrex do not respect galactic transport laws." Billy Bob thought quickly. Running would make them look guilty, but stopping meant almost certain trouble. "Are there any other shipping lanes nearby?" he asked. Zolk'tar's tentacles moved rapidly over the navigation console. "There is one, but it passes through an unmapped nebula. Sensors would be unreliable. Most navigators consider it too dangerous." The Vrex ship was closing fast. They had maybe 2 minutes before it would be within tractor beam range. "I'll take unmapped over boarded any day," Billy Bob decided. "Plot the course. Without reliable sensors, navigation will be extremely difficult," Zolk'tar warned, even as it entered the new coordinates. Billy Bob smiled grimly. "Back home, we call that driving by feel. Now let's show these Vrex what a human pilot can do." He pushed the engines to maximum thrust. The rusty nail surged forward, veering away from the patrol ship and toward a swirling cloud of glowing gases visible in the distance. "They are pursuing," Zolk'tar reported, "and they have launched warning shots." Energy beams flashed past their viewport, deliberate misses meant to intimidate them into stopping. Billy Bob gripped the controls tighter. "Hang on. Things are about to get interesting." The nebula loomed ahead of them, a beautiful but dangerous mix of swirling colors. As they plunged into its outer edges, their sensors began to falter. The Vrex ship followed, but at a more cautious pace. "They are hesitating," Zolk'tar noted. "Even the Vrex fear this place." "Good," Billy Bob said, guiding the ship deeper into the glowing mists. "Because I'm making this up as I go along." Inside the nebula, the rusty nail's instruments went crazy. The navigation screen showed only swirling static. The radar pinged phantom objects that weren't there. Even the artificial gravity flickered occasionally. "I cannot calculate a safe path," Zolk'tar said, its skin a worried mixture of colors. "The nebula's energy disrupts all sensors." Billy Bob nodded, his eyes focused ahead. "That's why we're not going to use them." He switched off the main computer navigation and took manual control. The ship responded more directly to his touch now, without the safety systems getting in the way. "What are you doing?" Zolk'tar asked, its voice rising in pitch. "When I was a kid in Kentucky, we used to race trucks on back roads with the headlights off," Billy Bob explained. "It was stupid and dangerous, but you learned to feel the road. Right now, we need to feel space." Billy Bob closed his eyes for a moment. sensing the subtle vibrations of the ship. When something large was nearby, the background hum of the engines changed slightly. The way the floor trembled under his feet told him about gravitational pulls. He opened his eyes and adjusted course, guiding them deeper into the nebula. The Vrex ship is still following, but they have slowed considerably, Zolk'tar reported, monitoring the faint signals they could still detect. They're relying on their computers, Billy Bob said. We're relying on instinct. For nearly an hour, they flew through the beautiful deadly cloud. Twice, Billy Bob avoided large asteroids hidden in the mists only seconds before they would have collided. Once, he deliberately flew close to a strong gravity field, using it to change their direction, while leaving no trail for the Vrex to follow. Finally, the nebula began to thin. Stars became visible again, and their instruments started working. "We've made it through," Zolk'tar said, its skin glowing with an impressed blue. "And the Vrex ship is no longer on our scanners." Billy Bob allowed himself to relax slightly. "Where are we now?" Zolk'tar checked the navigation computer as it came back online. "We have emerged on the far side of the nebula. Outpost 87 is actually closer from this position. We can reach it in 30 minutes. Billy Bob grinned. Sometimes getting lost is the best shortcut. When they arrived at Outpost 87, a small station orbiting a frozen moon, they were greeted with surprise. An official, a tall humanoid with 4 arms, rushed to meet them as they docked. "You've arrived early," the official said. "We weren't expecting the medical supplies for another day." "We took a little detour," Billy Bob explained. The official looked at their flight path on a data pad, and his eyes widened. "You came through the Whisper Nebula. That's unheard of for a cargo vessel." As the medical supplies were unloaded, Billy Bob and Zolk'tar received thanks from the outpost's medical staff. The medicines they delivered would treat a respiratory disease affecting the colony. "Your first delivery is complete," Zolk'tar said as they prepared for the return journey to Nexus 7. "And it was successful despite complications." "Just another day on the job," Billy Bob replied, though he couldn't hide his pride. Their return trip was uneventful. They took the long way around Vrex space, adding a few hours but avoiding further trouble. When they docked at Nexus 7, John Russell was waiting for them. His expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. "We got reports about your run-in with the Vrex," he said, "and about your nebula crossing. That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've seen a rookie pilot do." Billy Bob shrugged. "Sometimes you've got to take the road less traveled." John handed him a datapad. "Well, your courage has earned you a reputation. 3 stations have specifically requested the human who flies by feel for their deliveries. You've got a waiting list of jobs." Billy Bob looked at Zolk'tar, who had turned a happy shade of yellow. Then he looked out at the stars visible through the station's massive windows. "Sign me up," he said. "This space trucking thing is just getting interesting." What had started as a desperate choice to escape his empty life on Earth had become something more. Out here among the stars, Billy Bob Johnson had found his true calling. He was no longer just a man running from his past. He was a space trucker with a future as vast as the galaxy itself.